Right, we're at 4 minutes past 9, so there's still people coming in. If my colleagues can help me, if you can keep admitting people, we had. I should introduce myself. My name's Lorna Wagner. I'm the Programme Manager for Careers and Outreach for Maritime UK. We're absolutely delighted to have you all with us this morning. There were 95 people registered to join us today. I don't know if they'll all come, but every one of you, we appreciate you giving us your time. I have colleagues with me today that are going to help share the story. And the idea is that by the end of the session, hopefully you'll feel you've got an updated knowledge of what the maritime sector is doing nationally and in your part of the world, and feel better able to support your claimants and the people that you're providing that information and guidance for. I am recording the session. If you would rather not be seen and you want to turn off your cameras, that's absolutely fine. If I can ask you to go on mute for the moment, please. As I say, I have colleagues with me. We can answer questions in the chat as we go along, or we'll have opportunities for you to ask questions as well. That's a little bit more difficult when there's lots of you, but do ask questions in the chat and we'll pick it up as we go along. The session is due to run for 90 minutes and it's going to be whistle stop. So, okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we'll get cracking. So I hope you can see that. So that's the Maritime Careers logo. There's an animated version of it, but I haven't quite worked out how to get that into PowerPoint yet, which is awesome. The crane goes round, the anchor goes up and down, but just so you see that. So if I can just ask you, please stay on mute, ask your questions via the chat. I'm going to do a very quick overview for you of the sector. And then my colleagues will talk about different aspects in more detail. Ian McKinnon will talk to you about the different industries that are part of the sector. Karen will talk to you about what it's like to work in maritime and what the jobs are like and the reasons that people join us and why they go into certain roles and so on. Ian's then going to talk to us briefly about apprenticeships, both those that are marine and maritime based, but also the other apprenticeships, the other disciplines that maritime businesses use. Rachel is my colleague from the Merchant Navy Training Board, and she manages the Careers at Sea programme. So she's going to talk to you about those jobs that are on the water, if you like. And then Blue is going to talk to us about the leisure industry, and he has colleagues with him, employers, that will talk to you about their particular organisations. And then I'm going to tie it all up and close the session. As I say, do ask questions, and between us we'll pick them up in the chat. So Ian, can I hand over to you?
Yeah. Morning everyone. I'm Ian McKinnon. I'm Secretary to the Maritime Skills Alliance, and particularly for this audience, worth saying, a long time ago I was a job centre manager, manager of Shoreditch Job Centre in the East End of London, so I've got some sense of where you're coming from. I'm going to do just a fairly quick overview. Do you want to turn the slide, please, Lorna? Yeah, we've got some pages on the Maritime Careers website. I'll put the address down the bottom. Explore the sector. There's 13, I hope soon to be 14 different boxes there explaining different parts of the sector. And I'll run through that fairly quickly, but it's a terrific resource. Each of those is obviously hyperlinked and you'll find out more information on them. I won't say very much about the leisure sector. I'll work through in order. I won't say very much about the leisure sector because Blue will talk about that later on behalf of British Marine, which they're the trade body for the sector. Then the next one, that bright yellow thing right in the middle top of the screen, that's a crew transfer vessel taking technicians out to offshore wind turbines. Lots and lots of that. I think most of you are from the south of England, and there's a lot of that around the coast from north coast of Norfolk, Sheringham, off the Isle of Wight, off Kent, loads and loads of examples like that. So that little boat there has a crew of maybe 2 or 3, and it's taking the technicians out to the offshore turbines, and they go, they push hard against the nose, push the nose of that boat up against the turbine, and the engineers scramble off, do their work, and come back again a bit later. So that's a level 3 apprenticeship. Workboat apprenticeship. There are workboats supporting the construction sector in all sorts of different ways. Typically, though, always small boats. There's the workboat company that's represented on my board, based in the Ayrshire coast. Yvonne hardly ever sees the boats that she's responsible for in Scotland because they're almost all working in the Middle East. So there's some nice opportunities for fairly ordinary people with fairly ordinary qualifications to get some interesting, well-paid work overseas. Inland waterways, that's the next boat along. That's city cruisers there. The pleasure boats on the River Thames, obviously not terrifically active at the moment, but a big part of the Thames tourism market when they are active. But the inland waterways sector also includes moving freight. So I remember being thrilled, as I'm actually not a maritime person, I'm a skills person, but crossing Waterloo Bridge on one occasion, seeing a 1,000-ton barge coming towards me and recognising it. Nice moment. But a 1,000-ton barge taking material down to the building sites, say at the American Embassy or Battersea Power Station. 1,000-ton barge takes 50 HGVs off the road. So that's terrific from an environmental point of view in London. Those jobs are boatmaster jobs, special licence through the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, level 3, essentially translated. So there lots of interesting work there, both for on the freight side and on the passenger side. Engineering, we have a huge range of engineering opportunities across the sector. Opportunities on board vessels of different sizes and shapes, and opportunities ashore. Saw something a little earlier from Stena Line, one of the big international ferry companies, Swedish company with ferries around the UK coasts. They're looking to provide, create, build and run within a decade a ferry which runs without carbon fuel. It's one of the big challenges in the maritime sector to get rid of carbon fuel, oil-based fuel. It's moving freight by fuel is hugely efficient, but there's a lot of it. So worldwide, shipping accounts for about as much pollution as Germany. But each individual bit, moving individual items, is terrifically efficient. So there's a big engineering challenge, lots of opportunities for people in all sorts of different ways across the sector. Merchant Navy, Rachel will talk to you about that on behalf of the Merchant Navy Training Board, so I won't say much about it. Business services, I mean, Karen will say more, but just a quick word there, because that's a picture of the City of London, obviously. But there are opportunities all the way around the coast. One of the things that's particularly highlighted at the moment is people doing all the paperwork associated with shipping goods in and out. 95% of all the goods that we use in this country, including probably every screen that every one of you is looking at, they've all come by sea. And all that means paperwork. It meant paperwork anyway. It means more paperwork as a result of Brexit. So the people managing all that have a huge amount of work to do. And you get things like, I mean, that ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal, field day for the lawyers. Suez Canal Authority wants $900 million by way of compensation. They've just reduced it to 600 million. The shipping company is obviously disputing that. Big fight. Lawyers will win. Lots of opportunity for people to do interesting work. You turn the slide, please, Laura. Lorna. I don't know why I keep saying Laura. Ports and harbours. I'll say more about ports and harbours myself in a minute. Super yachts. These are professionally crewed yachts. I mean, the biggest of them, when you take Abramovich, the Chelsea owner, his biggest yacht has a crew of about 70. There's a huge range of jobs there, primarily focused on serving the guests on board. So there's both all the engineering stuff in normal, because the ship counts as a big ship, some of these, needs to go, but also serving the guests. When I've been on holiday in Greece, I've seen a little one moored in front of me, crew of 4 and 4 passengers. Some of that's very close interaction with the passengers. Interesting work for people, particularly young people working in the Med for a bit. Nice opportunities, well paid. Typically, they quote €2,500 a month as a normal salary, so not bad. And primarily, these are jobs that go for people who've got the right personality to work with the guests and some practical nous. And some of you are from the Isle of Wight. UKSA, UK Sailing Association in Cowes, is the leading provider of training in the super yacht sector. Marine science. Again, loads of opportunities. There's a lot there for people with degrees. National Oceanography Centre, for example, in Southampton, they've got 600 scientists working there. Great majority, possibly all, I'm not sure, will have degrees. It's the sort of thing that the UK is really good at because we've got lots of coast and lots of clever people exploiting it and exploring it. So just, reading recently that there's a team from the National Oceanography Centre that's been working in Bangladesh trying to understand better the way the delta of the Ganges and all the other rivers in Bangladesh work. Hugely important there to the economy and to society in Bangladesh. Lots of interesting opportunities. I remember hearing a presentation from people at Bangor University looking at the water around the Anglesey, with tides coming from both directions, therefore particularly interesting bits of water, all the ocean science connected with fishing. Fishing on the next slide, sea fishing and aquaculture. Fishing's not as big as it used to be, but there's some good opportunities still. And typically smaller boats in the south of England, 2, 3, 4, 5 crew. Bigger ones tend to be further north because they're working in the North Atlantic. But in Cornwall, for example, there's a group of there's a fishing organisation and group of people who are burstingly keen to resurrect the apprenticeship, which we lost a few years ago because of changes in policy at the Department for Education. So there's real enthusiasm in certain quarters to get that back. Aquaculture, biggest in Scotland, but pretty big and growing in England. Naval architecture, boat design. Nice example, again, using Isle of Wight as an example. You've got Wight Shipyard there, the place without the Union Jack on the doors. Company that's reinvented itself, building fast ferries. All those need to be designed, and the model they've got there, although the core is a fast ferry, when you're designing a fast ferry for the River Thames, which is tidal, it's different from designing it for the Danube. They built one for the Vienna-Bratislava run. That's not tidal. So different operating requirements. Different again to going out to the islands off the coast of Mexico. Different again in Malta. And it's a really good export market. All of that requires naval architecture, which naval architecture is design. Design in boat, yacht, ship terms. And although you might think we don't build so much these days, I grew up on Tyneside. And back in the heyday when we were still building really big ships on a common basis, tankers, all sorts of things like that. We don't do that anymore. Those things are built out east where the building is cheaper. But we build sophisticated vessels, and the data that Blue's organisation, British Marine, produces every year shows we build thousands of vessels of different sorts in Britain every year. And even something like a small fishing boat built for a three-man in reality fishing boat, that still needs to be designed because it's got a different job in different parts of the market. So shipbuilding and boat building, a good range of opportunities. I saw this morning posted, I hope you're going to retweet it, Blue, something from Burton Shipyard, Boatyard in Lymington, a really strong apprenticeship provider. They're recruiting for apprentices in boat building, shipwrights, painting and spraying. A lot of the senior managers in Burton have come up through the apprenticeship route. Some good opportunities. Royal Navy, we've got colleagues from the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, who are the people who, the civilian force, uniformed civilian force that supports the Royal Navy. And I think probably they'll touch on that later. Better to leave it to them. Turn the slide, please, Lorna. Yeah, so say a bit more about ports, just as in it to illustrate some of the depth within each of those examples. Vessel traffic services, that's air traffic control in reality, providing exactly the same services you get in the air, but providing it at sea, so that so vessels don't bump into each other. And in many places, particularly those, I mean, if those of you who are anywhere near the Solent, hugely busy all the way along the English Channel, with traffic separation service, keeping vessels going north separate from those going south, and so on. VTS controls all that. Pilots are the people who guide the vessels in, fairly familiar, I think people are with that. But they also need launch crews. There's a fast launch that goes out to take the pilots out, and somebody drives that. In our terms, I mean, that's a level 2 role. Harbour masters. 2 weekends time, I will be in Falmouth on holiday. We stay in a place with a wonderful view across Falmouth Harbour over to the docks, and you see lots of little boats, people enjoying themselves, and you see some huge boats. There's normally a Royal Fleet Auxiliary vessel or two moored there, having some work done on it. There's typically a super yacht having work done on it. There may be a freighter come in, there might be a cruise ship. There's certainly the RNLI lifeboat. All of that in a fairly confined space, and the harbour master needs to manage all that and make it work commercially. I think people are fairly familiar with tugs, and we saw a terrific example when the Ever Given was stuck in the Suez Canal with, I think, maybe 10 tugs pulling and pushing it to try and shift it in the end. Dutch company that sorted it out. Security has always been a big issue in ports. Typically, ports have had huge wars to stop people going in and nicking things. But security also means these days watching out for jihadis, and it also means watching out for cybersecurity. Hydrographers are the people who map the surface underneath the water. So when the largest container ship in the world called in on the Thames a few months ago, the hydrography team from the Port of London Authority went out just to check that there was room. The clearance underneath these vessels really isn't very big. It was about a metre, I think, in the end. But the surface underneath the water moves, and you've got to keep mapping that on a regular basis using sonar. Ports typically have a wide range of other roles, like electricians and electronic engineers, and all the electronics getting to be a bigger and bigger part. You might typically think of a port in the past as people who hoist things on their back, and obviously not anymore. It's all done done with cranes, but those cranes need to be maintained. And not exactly a shortage, but a critical skills requirement in many ports is the software engineers to manage the cranes. Crane drivers don't need skill anymore. They certainly need skill, but they need a different sort of skill, but they don't need the physical power that they used to have. So the example that they really like to use on the Thames is a young woman who used to be working with nails. And she had precision, which is what you need when you're using grabbing a container and moving it off a vessel and onto the shore and vice versa. And port agents are the people who manage the paperwork, a huge amount of paperwork. Next slide, Lorna. So who does the sector suit? I think it suits everybody. I think from all the way from people who've got PhDs who want to design floating offshore wind turbines. I mean, a big deal down in the southwest, Cornwall, where you can't stick the legs on the ground because it's too far away. So floating offshore wind is getting to be more and more important. We've proved that it works off the coast of the northeast of Scotland, Aberdeen and Orkney. Now getting to be a bigger deal, but designing all that and making it work in different sets of conditions, lots of opportunity there for the brightest, but also for people with no academic qualifications, absolutely none, but loads and loads of practical nous. The sector really supports and works with and suits people who've got practical nous, people who can get a vessel from here to there without bumping into something, and everyone in between. So variety, challenge, teamwork, good rewards, lots and lots. Last comment before I pass on. We've been working with the school in Cowes, what do they call it? Cowes Enterprise College. I invited the principal and her number two to an event a couple of years ago to introduce them to a range of people across the sector, because they're weaving maritime all the way through the curriculum, and we're working with Pearson to get a level 2 qualification on the back of that. And Rachel said to me afterward, this is fantastic because there's something here to suit everybody in the school if they're interested. Okay, that'll do for me for now. Thank you, Lorna.
Thanks very much, Ian. And I'll introduce myself. My name's Karen Waltham. I'm an HR director by profession, and I've been in the maritime industry for about 12, 14 years. But firstly, I've been in a role as a employer, so actually employing people within the sector. But what I would say is, having been in the sector for the length of time I have, I really wish I'd been into maritime earlier. So for anyone doing HR or anything else, people think it isn't, I haven't necessarily sailed. As Ian was saying, that doesn't make any difference at all. It just means that we've actually enjoyed the sector, and there's so much to do. So that's a little bit about me. Can you just turn the slide, please, Lorna? So I was asked the question, what's it like to work in maritime? And you may be wondering, what does this actually represent? But what I've done is I've actually gone back to a conversation I had with a group of school children going back about 7 years now. And in answering that question, I thought the actual exercise, if you like, with the school children was, it was a what's my line? So what do I do? So I thought, what can I take with me? And I took with me a bunch of bananas, a mobile phone, and it was actually a globe or a blow up. It was a beach ball actually, which was in the shape of a globe, a picture of a globe. And when I'd finished the session with these 9-year-olds at the time, only one person came up with anything that was close to what I actually did. And in fact, the young boy turned around to me and said, "Am I an airline pilot?" Which I thought was quite nice. But actually, when I showed a picture of a big container ship and a poster of a container ship, everyone's mouths dropped open. And it was like, oh my goodness me, shipping and maritime. And I think it's just very indicative of the fact that perhaps even right from an early age, people don't think about maritime as a career and the work that we do within the sector. So why did I take bananas? Well, actually, if you go down to Portsmouth and Southampton, you'll see the 5 containers, and believe you me, there's enough bananas there to feed us all for years to come. And I couldn't, at the time I was working for a major oil company, and I couldn't take oil with me. So I also took a mobile phone, because all of us have got mobile phones, and the majority of what we have in front of us now, even now in our offices or wherever you're sitting, will have come and arrived by sea. And also, as far as the globe's concerned, maritime is global. Maritime is one of those industries that actually, whether we like it or not, it is a day-to-day thing. I know we talk about it within the UK, but we're in Ireland, which makes it even more important for us. And I think we forget that sometimes, that maritime, as Ian has already highlighted, it's going on all around us. But because we don't necessarily see it, and because we don't necessarily, if we're flying or whatever, we might go on holidays, but unless you're actually cruising or you're on the coast, etc., you don't necessarily think about it. I'll come back to that later. So next slide, please, Lorna. So when we talk about why is it, why work in maritime and why is it important? I think it's different, but maritime is different, but it's also the same. And all the jobs that we actually do in maritime are done elsewhere as well. So Ian's already highlighted in terms of what, some of the sea roles, but everything that goes on at sea happens to be supported by those ashore. And I really describe it as, it's different, but actually I feel it's better. As I say, I don't stop saying I wish I'd come to maritime earlier. Maritime tends to be, when people think about, oh, that's a career at sea, you don't have to start at sea. Ian and I are examples, and others are as well. You don't have to have, you can start it on shore and you can go to sea. You can never sail at all, but you can work within the sector. It is a really well-paid sector as well. When we talk about maritime pay, on average, 38, sort of £1,000. National average is 29. I think, the biggest assumption again is that if you're at sea, you're not necessarily doing things. Is it well paid or not? But actually, within the sector overall, it's a well-paid sector. And I think we do need to eradicate this idea that to work in the sector you have to start at sea. So that's one of the things that, especially working in the second careers or within the job seekers kind of thing, it's encouraging people to look wider. For me, no 2 days are the same. And I mean that really sincerely in terms of being an HR professional, but actually within the sector. But also, when going back to the global issue, we could be talking about anything else in the world, and it does widen our aspects of our careers by thinking about what else is going on in the world and how that links to us. We could be talking. In fact, yesterday, conversations with Holland, India, Germany, just to name but 3. And as I say, connecting us all. Next slide, please, Lorna. When I talk to students particularly, but I think this relates to anybody in wherever they are in their career, we talk about what's your favourite subject, if you like, and what's your favourite, the things that actually interest them. Having worked in the sort of the professional HR field, I like to have what I call a square peg in a square hole, a round peg in a round hole, and trying to find those subjects and keeping people interested into their day-to-day work is so important. And it obviously not only motivates people, but actually keeps them engaged and keeps them enthusiastic, and it gives them the opportunity and the desire to learn more about what they're doing. So when we talk about things like geography, for example, anything, I mean, Ian's highlighted some of the areas, but having an interest in the world, having an interest about, travelling perhaps when we can, but looking and working with people who are abroad, but also things like the physical or human geography, and how whether it's seafloor mapping or from that point of view, or marine biology, or whether it's actually the logistics and the demographics, if you like, of how the industry works. Sciences, anything from sciences, really we're talking about engineering, we're talking about navigation, we're talking about, ecology, biology, we talk about surveyors. Surveyors often, we talk about those within the on the shore-based side, but actually we have marine surveyors, so you could be based on shore, but marine surveyors visit vessels and go to ports and talk to ship owners and ship managers. From a maths point of view, people who are good on figures, again, we talk anything from the finance side, HR analytics, we talk about voyage sales and finance and marketing areas as well. English links to law, maritime law. Historically, goes back an awful lot longer than some of the other industries that we all work in. We all maybe have worked in or linked with, but maritime law is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And we're talking at the moment about the shift from, normal, what we see as on the sea at the moment, to automation, etc. And the skills required are being completely, different in the future. And it could be as big as what we went from sail to engine and motorised, in centuries ago. So that's from a legal point of view. Business studies. I mean, Ian highlighted things like, we talk about paperwork, we talk about anything that's, in terms of the supply chain, but sales, marketing, the commercial side of elements. Again, you're talking globally as well, links for, a voyage. When we talk about a voyage for a vessel, you've got the crew that are managing the vessel and actually on board, but you're talking about anybody who's linked with where that vessel goes, and on shore, people tracking where the crew is, where the cargo is, how to release it, where the logistics, etc., making sure that provisions and crew changes happen. Everything like that is happening on ashore as well, and all of that happens. Economics, broking, insurance, really key part of the industry. And that's city-based, tends to be more city-based, and within, again, globally. I put art, technology and design down because we've talked about architecture, but actually I have a great story with, I was invited to attend the pre-maiden voyage of the Harmony of the Seas in Southampton by Royal Caribbean, and the designer of the carpet that went all the way from one end of the vessel to the other. Absolutely so proud of the design that they'd done that put this carpet in. But when I stood there on board this vessel, which was, as I say, the hugest in the world at the time, really not someone you would necessarily think was linked to the maritime industry, but very, very much so. Languages. Obviously, from a, I think we pride ourselves in saying we're a very, very diverse sector. We're doing a lot of work within diversity in maritime, etc. at the moment, as all areas are. But from the working with different nationalities, different types of people, different cultures from all around the world, it's a fascinating area. Next slide, please, Lorna. So when we talk to people about their careers, we talk about any of the things that typically you might see on that left-hand side, or perhaps jobs that you might already be thinking about, people might be that you work with thinking about, or whether it's younger people or people changing careers or people looking for other opportunities. They're words we would automatically perhaps recognise. On the right-hand side, chartering, marine and technical opportunities and new builds and bits and pieces are titles or areas that, even if you got people to look at them within the and Google the names and think about how that can link, and think about how we can how their any careers could link, can be really interesting. Pick out a few there because I know we've got a busy agenda, but health and safety, for example, is really key at the moment. You can imagine the safety requirements actually on vessels, but if people are really interested in the well-being and the welfare, etc., of people, then actually health and safety is very, very important within the maritime industry. Crewing changes, very pivotal at the moment, tend to be shore-based roles, but actually we have, I'm really bad on, Ian might put this in the chat actually, but I can never remember how many crew we have on actually globally at sea at any one point, but also the crew changes that happen, and working with people all the time is absolutely amazing. I believe I have one more slide, please, Lorna. I do, which is who and where can you find out more about what we do, and encourage people that you talk to look at these areas. One of the things I will say as you look at that slide is actually to encourage people to look around their normal day-to-day life. When we pass container lorries on the roads, if we're at train stations, Maersk, CGM, CMA, for example, are really big, and Evergreen are exactly a large containers that you will see all the time, and those link to the sea. But actually it reminds people that that is a maritime industry, that they could work in any way, shape or form within that industry. BP, Shell, Chevron, Green Line, for example, they're all companies that people might know but never think that actually links to the sea. So I would encourage people to think about familiar names, look at ship owners who actually own the vessels, ship managers who manage the vessels, sometimes on the behalf of the owners, but also sometimes, in terms of independently. Ship brokers who are doing all the financing behind the scenes. So insurance companies, as Ian says, there's a lot of money to be made, but they're very busy people, especially when you have the number of vessels we have globally actually on the water. Other ones just to pick out there, really, as I say, Ian's picked out a lot. Ports and harbours are just a quick story that I do tell, which having moved to the coast in Essex, I went down to Brightlingsea the other day and bumped into a young lady who was working a small dredger within the port, within the harbour itself. And I was talking to her because we were looking at diversity and women in the sector. And it turns out that she's actually only doing a sort of a holiday job because she's doing ecology or environmental sciences down in the West Country somewhere at university. And she lives locally and she's interested in the sector. And she introduced me to another young lady who actually had gone into veterinary surgery, couldn't get a job, really tight environment which was difficult to enter, but actually she lived locally, and she's now the apprentice at Brightlingsea Harbour, and a young lady called Ellie Jane. There's a little piece on her on their website, so do take a look. But really interesting to see how people will change sectors because they've got sea out on their doorstep. It doesn't need to be for everybody, but it's certainly an interesting one. So I think I would close, and before I hand over, I would say, I wish I'd come into Maritime earlier. I will do anything I can to encourage people into this sector. Absolutely fascinating. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and long may it last as far as I'm concerned. So I say I would encourage anyone in. So next slide, please, Lorna, and I wish you all a good day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen. Me again. I'm deputising for a colleague who would normally do the apprenticeship slot. Can you give us the next slide, please, Lorna? Yeah, Daryl from the Marine Society would normally talk about apprenticeships. Marine Society, oldest charity in the sector, 1754. We're trying to recruit people for the Royal Navy because back in those days, people needed to be press ganged outside pubs, and this chap thought there was a better way of doing it. So in terms of practicalities on apprenticeships, we don't have huge numbers, but we have high quality apprenticeships. I know that in some sectors there's concern that apprenticeships are used as cheap labour. Employers are exploiting people. I really don't think we have that in our sector. I think we've got hundreds of apprenticeships rather than tens of thousands, but we've got employers who really want people to learn how to do the job properly. I mean, think of the practicalities. Whether you're building a boat or whether you're sailing in one with colleagues, you want them to get it right. If things go wrong at sea, things go quite badly wrong. If you're managing paperwork in an office and things go badly wrong, then, well, you know, you kind of argue your way out of it. At sea, you're in real trouble. So there's a range, and we've got the seagoing apprenticeships and those ashore, so I take them in turn. Karen mentions deep sea container ships like the Ever Given that got stuck in the Suez Canal. There aren't apprenticeships in those sectors for people in the UK. Typically, the crewing on those vessels is done by relatively cheap foreigners in shorthand. All the crew of that vessel were Indian. It was a Taiwanese ship managed by a German company, an Indian crew, and an all-Indian crew makes it all from one nationality, makes it easier in management terms. But coastal ferries around the UK, that's the core of the seagoing market for apprenticeships. So if you take DFDS ferries or P&O ferries out of Dover, both companies are strong on apprenticeships, really keen, have got it and have absolutely woven it into the way that they manage their long-term and their succession plans, because they know they've got an ageing workforce. These are seagoing in the sense that if you're an apprentice on board one of those cross-channel ferries, you live on board for 2 weeks. So you might think it's only a 2-hour hop across, therefore I can stay at home. Well, they do it again and again and again. And for operational reasons like the weather, things change. So practically they sleep on board. And you know, that doesn't suit everybody. If you like going out with your mate every night, then you can't do that, clearly. I mean, you've got mates on board and that's different. But so typically 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. But that's a working pattern that suits lots of people because you're working hard, working with your mates, good team atmosphere for 2 weeks, and then you've got 2 weeks to yourself. And depending on the type of vessel that you're working on, that can be 3 months on, 3 months off, you know, all sorts of different patterns. But for seagoing apprenticeships, it's ferries that dominate the market, plus the workboat in the UK, plus the workboat sector, those crew transfer vessels that I talked about. Shoreside port sector is there are level 2 apprenticeships for port operatives. In the Marine Leisure Centre, building boats. Blue will probably say a bit more about that later, but building boats of different sorts, boats and yachts and ships, a lot of opportunity there. And one of the things that's different about the sector in terms of apprenticeships is that typically they end up with a license to practice. The regulator for the maritime sector is the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, an agency of the Department for Transport, and that's implementing agreements which are worldwide through the International Maritime Organization. So people get a ticket as a result of their apprenticeship, which they can use typically anywhere in the world. What's the difference between deep sea and coastal? Somebody's asking. Right, okay. Coastal means, for example, around the coast of the UK. So it will be something like the Isle of Wight ferry. It'll be all the ferries in the west of Scotland where my family comes from. It would include cross-channel ferries. I think you would include, a trip across the North Sea. It's a bit further, and then you can get some quite hairy weather, but it's not very big. But deep sea would be taking a container ship to the Far East and back, or it would be cruise ships, long distance. And also, I suppose, the science and exploratory sector. So something like the David Attenborough, Royal Research Ship David Attenborough, Boating McBoatface. That obviously does its research in the Antarctic, and that's deep sea, very much deep sea. Crew of 40 alongside all the scientists. Go to the next slide, please, Lorna. Yeah. So a range. We've got worth pointing out that some of the apprenticeships that we have are second stage apprenticeships. So something like Marine Technical Superintendent or Port Marine Operations Officer on that list, or Harbour Master. Typically, they're an apprenticeship or surveyor, which Karen talked about. They're apprenticeships which go to people who've already done some work. So perhaps as a naval architect in the case of a surveyor, or perhaps working at sea. So somebody who's got a base of knowledge and then they're trained for the surveying jobs. I think it's the wrong shorthand, but it will do for this group. A surveyor essentially says this vessel is seaworthy. It's a bit more complex than that, but that's the core of it. This vessel is seaworthy and it has certain characteristics and it can do this and that. So important skilled jobs, but it's different from driving a ship at sea or working in the engine at sea. Therefore, there's an additional role there. Therefore, people can do this second stage apprenticeship, typically in their mid-20s. So the person who had Lorna's job before her retired from the sea at the age of about 24 after having done 8 years or so. And if you're in your mid-20s, that's an opportunity to retrain. Next slide, Lorna. And a case study, Boatmaster. I'm talking about Joy McGlinchey, who's the person on the second right, the woman looking straight at the camera with a tie on. Joy finished her apprenticeship as a boatmaster at the age of 24 on the Lower Thames. And as a boatmaster, she was skipper of a passenger ferry, fast passenger ferry, one of the Thames Clippers, with potentially 220 passengers. It's a level 3 apprenticeship, so that's quite a responsible job for a level 3 apprenticeship. And she came into the industry with A-levels, lived on the river. She got some family connection, which was fairly typical. Joy was only the second female skipper on the River Thames. The company obviously used that, loved it. So International Women's Day 2 years ago, I think it was, maybe 3, Joy skippered an all-female crew, 4 crew on a Thames Clipper. They arranged for her 3 crewmates all to be women. Nice PR opportunity on that day. But it's a really good job to get for somebody. Serious, responsible jobs. And Joy's now moved on. She did that job for a few years and she's now moved on to a more responsible job ashore. I don't know exactly what role. Okay, thank you, Lorna. Yeah, and there's a whole series of further links there with further information. Thames Skills Academy will provide more information on that boatmaster role on the Thames, but arranged there. Obviously, as you know, apprenticeships are different in England and Scotland, so different links. We've got quite a bit on our website on Maritime Skills Alliance. Over to Rachel now, is it? I think. Yeah, over to Rachel.
Thanks, Ian. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel, and I currently manage the Careers at Sea programme, which is run through the Merchant Navy Training Board. As we go along, if you've got any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. I've got it open so I can watch out for anything that comes up. Can I have the next slide, please, Lorna? Okay, so this is a screenshot of one of our pages on the Careers at Sea website, which is our kind of centre place for all the information for anything to do with careers at sea on board ship. And as lots of my other the other speakers and colleagues have spoken about, the maritime industry is huge, and the Careers at Sea website talks specifically about careers on board ship in the Merchant Navy. And so we've got a page on there called What is the Merchant Navy? And it is essentially commercial shipping. So you've heard lots of different types of vessels mentioned. So things like ferries, cruise ships, tankers, container ships. That's the kind of vessels that we're talking about that people work on. And there's a few photos here that we can kind of speak about. So you've got a container ship there, as well as a picture of one of the research vessels. I think that was mentioned by Ian at one point. So the idea is that there's lots of different areas within the Merchant Navy that's covered, such as research, transport, support, and travel. So there's lots of different information about that on that page if you would like to have a look. It's called the careersatsea.org/Merchant Navy. Next slide, please, Lorna. So on the Careers at Sea website, we've got all the information about how to start your training on to become a Merchant Navy seafarer. So there's two kind of main routes. You've got a cadetship route and a rating or apprenticeship route. And some of those were talked about a little bit with the kind of ratings apprenticeship route with Ian earlier. But the cadetship route is the kind of cadets will go on board and they will learn to be parts of different teams within the ship. So you've got the deck navigation team, you've got the engine and the electrotechnical officer route. So for those of you who might not know, electrotechnical officers will work within the engine team, but will work on the more kind of the electrical kind of sophisticated sections of ships, such as with the big cruise ships, for example. So there'll be lots of kind of technical parts that some people might need to specialize in. So there'll be different roles depending on different vessels, for example. The deck team, navigation team will obviously be part of the navigation side, but also when it comes to passenger ferries, for example, there'll also be some responsibilities with passenger engagement in some levels as well. But that might also come under the ratings and apprenticeship route as well. And the engine team, whether it's engine or electrotechnical, will spend a lot of their time, funnily enough, within the engine room and working on maintaining and running the systems that keep the ship moving. So that could be everything from the engines that actually move the ship from A to B, all the way up to things like water and refrigerators and all those kind of systems as well. So a very varied role. And again, one of my colleagues spoke about no 2 days the same. It's the same on board ship. So on the website, we've got careersatsea.org/careers/choose your role to have a look at a little bit more detail about the different roles that are available and what kind of things you can expect within those roles. We've got information on how to apply for training. All of the training is fully sponsored. So what you do is you apply to a sponsoring company, and they sponsor for your training and throughout your cadetship. So that includes the college training as well as the onboard training, so that at the end of it you have your kind of qualification to be able to work on board a vessel anywhere in the world. Again, like some of my colleagues have said, it's a global industry, so it gives you that kind of ability to work on board any type of vessel around the world, depending on what kind of work you want to do, whether that is ferries doing the kind of more coastal work or going back and forth between different coasts, or the deep sea kind of roles as well. And like we said, there, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's shifts change depending on what type of vessel you're on, but it's something that is slightly out of the kind of very out of the ordinary of the 9-to-5 role. So good for someone who's looking for something a little bit different. I've also got a link here because as much as we've oh, bear with me, I haven't got the link actually. I'll get that for you. I'll put it in a bit later. While we say that there's no upper age limit to applying for the sponsorship, there's one thing that you do need to consider is that everybody who works on board a ship needs to pass a medical assessment known as an ENG1, and that is managed by the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, who have been mentioned before. I'll make sure that I've got a link in there for you, so just bear with me while here we go, got a link here. Okay, for some reason it's not working. I'll send it in a second. But the idea is that they will medically assess you to see if you're fit and able to do the work on board ship. So so don't be worried. I know within Job Centre Plus you might not necessarily be speaking to younger people. There might be people who want to come into a kind of second role. There isn't an upper age limit, but you need to consider the kind of potential medical assessments just to make sure you're fit and ready to go about the day-to-day roles on board a vessel. Next slide, please, Lorna. So we have a team of Careers at Sea ambassadors, and these are all people who have worked in the Merchant Navy on board ship at some point within their career. So some people are currently training, so they're cadets, they're actually kind of studying in the nautical colleges or at sea. We've also got newly qualified people and some who have progressed both on board ships, so they're not cadets anymore, they've moved up the ranks, so they might be a chief engineer if they're working in the engineering side, or captain, for example, in the navigation side, or people who have moved to roles ashore. So we talked again about all the different roles and how big the maritime industry is. There are a few kind of seafarers who have started their work on board ship and then moved to shore-based roles. So, for example, working as lecturers in nautical colleges, teaching the next generation of seafarers, or perhaps people might go into something like surveying we've talked about, or into crew management and training management. So there's lots of different areas that people might progress into. But our ambassadors have all got experience, and what they do is share that with others to give people an understanding of kind of what it's like to work at sea and the different things they can do. So for schools, we have things like careers fairs and assemblies that they can speak to. But if any of you within Job Centre Plus have any events or anything that goes on that side, we can have one of our ambassadors come to speak to you guys and give you a more detailed presentation specifically on careers at sea, including their first-hand experiences. It's a free service, so all you need to do is get in touch with me through the Careers at Sea website to be able to do that. Yeah, can I have the next slide, please, Lorna? So these are all of our kind of links online, and I will make sure that I get a link for the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency for that medical assessment. So bear with me while I send that over. But you've got the careersatsea.org link there. We've also got a YouTube link. It's our promotional video called To See or Not to See. And we're also on several social media pages, again, where you'll see examples of some of our Careers at Sea ambassadors sharing their experiences. So if you're interested to hear more from a seafarer themselves, you can have a look at those pages. Let me see. Would the role of an ambassador be suitable for someone who has been in the Merchant Navy but unable to go to sea on medical grounds? So the ambassador roles are more kind of volunteer promotional role, just to clarify that, to be able to go out and speak to schools directly. But if they are interested in talking about their experiences with people who are interested in coming into the industry, then they absolutely could, because they would have been able to have some experience on board ship. And I think it's worth lots of different people sharing their different experiences and using the training that they've got to kind of progress within their careers, whether that is at sea or ashore. I don't think I've got another slide, but Lorna, go to the next slide for me, please. So I'll be handing over to Blue now, who will talk to you a little bit more about the leisure boat industry, and I will send over a link to you with that medical assessment as a promise. Bear with me for that.
Actually, we're not going to Blue at the moment. We're going to bring in our colleagues from the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, who are going to talk to us for 10 minutes about their organisation just before we go to Blue, if that's okay. Are you there, me, RYA?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can. Yeah.
Excellent.
Do you want to take over control of this?
Yeah, that's fine. I've been experiencing a lot of technical issues. I can't see the slides, so I've got an audible presentation to give, if that's okay.
That's fine. We can see you. That's lovely.
All right, that's okay. Okay, so my name's Steve Pells. I'm a third officer marine engineer for the Royal Fleet Auxiliary Service. 14 years into my RFA career, now working with the recruitment team in Portsmouth as a recruitment staff officer. So I've been kindly invited to give a sort of 10-minute. I know times are quite tight at the moment, but I'll try not to waffle on too much. Just to give you an overview of what the Royal Fleet Auxiliary is and how it fits into the Royal Navy, because if there's one thing I've learned throughout my career is that not a lot of people know what the RFA is or what we do. So as Ian and Karen touched on earlier, we as an island nation rely heavily on the trade of goods and services for our economy. We therefore require a navy to ensure that we are free to operate around the globe and for the defence of our shores, promoting and protecting UK interests globally. So where do we fit in? The Royal Fleet Auxiliary, known as the RFA, not the RAF, is a world-class maritime operational support force, predominantly civilian manned, providing logistical and operational support for the Royal Navy's activities worldwide, including NATO support. Established in 1905, the RFA has historically been supplying the ships of the Royal Navy with stores, ammunition and fuel, including which began as coal transportation bunkers. Shortly after we got rid of the sailboats. So we have a capability to operate in any part of the world, including war zones where normal commercial shipping cannot. During World War II, the RFA has seen action in every naval theatre of operations from the Arctic to the Pacific. We've supported more recent military operations, including the Falklands conflict of '82, Bosnian War of the 90s, both Gulf Wars, the Libyan military intervention 2011, and we're still currently active in the Persian Gulf, ensuring safe passage of trade routes through hostile waters where there are still threats from foreign interference and piracy. We've also played a key role in humanitarian operations directed by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, including the Ebola crisis of Sierra Leone in 2014 and ongoing hurricane disaster relief efforts in the Caribbean. This gives the UK a key asset to respond to emerging crises due to our constant state of high readiness. Out of season, the Caribbean deployed platform will also carry out counter-narcotic operations, working closely with the US Coast Guard, disrupting the flow of illegal drug activities throughout the British overseas territories up to the United States. The RFA also maintain regular foreign engagements, sharing the Royal Navy's commitments to overseas territories, reassuring our allies and flying the flag for Great Britain. Whilst it's not traditionally been a key area of focus for the Royal Navy, the RFA has grown in importance as ever more complex surface fleet requires replenishment, repair and support. The ace card of the RFA is our ability to replenish vessels whilst at sea. This evolution, known as a RAS, which stands for replenishment at sea, is the capability to pump fuel, water, transfer pallets of stores, ammunition and food from one ship to another whilst both ships are moving through the water. Our Bay-class ships, equipped with floodable docks, are able to deploy many craft and vehicles from the stern to support amphibious operations. We are also on hand to assist with repairs to other surface ships, submarines, or shoreside equipment where required, offer medical support with our hospital facilities, and our helicopters and fast boats extend our capabilities even further. Technological advances have brought about new challenges. So in addition to the roles taken on due to our ship's greater capabilities, we now also undertake ever more NATO task force operations. However, whilst the RFA is part of the wider naval service, its military standing is more defensive rather than offensive, but we are able to deliver maritime surveillance, security and policing and a command platform to launch any military operations from. So this means working closely with other arms of the MOD and even allied forces. The weapons we carry are for our own self-defence, and they are manned by crew or onboard assigned force protection teams, usually the Royal Marine Commandos. Our ships are also used occasionally by the UK Special Forces for training evolutions. So, are we trained as military? RFA personnel are employed as civil servants of the Crown. By civilian, this is not to say we are not in any way inexperienced with military. In fact, many RFA personnel are former military service personnel in some form, or at least trained to the same standards. We also deploy with a range of military service personnel in order to deliver our output depending on what we're doing. New entrants into the RFA are trained at a Royal Navy establishment, depending on their role. For officer cadets, they'll attend Britannia Royal Naval College, Dartmouth, where they are trained to be a naval officer, upholding the traditions and standards as well as developing leadership skills. Other rates will also begin training at a naval establishment, depending on their chosen role, where they'll develop the skills needed to become an effective RFA sailor. All new entrants are subject to sponsored reserve agreement, where they'll become a special member of the Naval Reserves. What that basically means is that in time of war or activation, they are offered protection under the Geneva Convention. RFA sailors do additional training to broaden a range of skills. Training such as damage control, first aid, chemical, biological, radioactive and nuclear respirator training, more extensive firefighting, warfare and weapons training, all depending on the role that the seafarer is in. All this is in addition to the Manila updates, SDCW certification, which is required under the IMO Manila updates. Entrants will be employed as Crown civil servants with no specific duration or upper age restriction. You can work in the RFA until pensionable age, subject to passing the medical standards. The pension scheme is a civil service pension scheme and not a military pension scheme. So, as Rachel touched on earlier, the rules are pretty much the same with additional bits and pieces. So communications, you'll be dealing with classified information in a sensitive manner, Morse code, flags and signals, things like that. Deck department, navigation with the addition of warfare and some helicopters operations. SE or ETO, the systems engineer and commonly known now as electrotechnical officers, will deal with sensitive communication systems, radar, auxiliary machinery, high voltage and anything electrical really. Marine engineering, propulsion, water generation, sewage, all the usual with the addition of weapons maintenance. Logistics, look after catering, laundry, stores, supply and stock management, and all the departments coordinate ships husbandry and other areas of responsibility and all have secondary duties for emergency evolutions and training exercises that we conduct on a regular basis. The rank structure, very much, it is a civilian rank structure, but it is in line with the Royal Navy, so marks of respect and traditions are still practiced, with each grade enjoying their own independence in the way of accommodation, dining and social arrangements. Life on board an RFA, it's never the same. Each trip is different and the tempo is fast paced. You'll get to meet some interesting characters and friends for life. You'll always have the support of a colleague on board when you need it. General amenities, we've got bars, email, limited Wi-Fi, gym facilities, library, magazines, TV service and a satellite phone service. So we are modernising. So as Rachel mentioned earlier, and this is the thing that's always causing the confusing people, is our medical and fitness requirements. Being a part of the Royal Navy, everyone's expecting it to be Royal Navy fitness standards when it's not. We require all our candidates to pass the ENG1 medical and receive a full 2-year unrestricted certificate, which is the Merchant Seafarer standard in MSN 1860, whatever it is. Whilst there are no stipulated requirements for fitness outside of the ENG1 medical standards, officers under training will be expected to undertake leadership tasks which have a physical aspect. You should be able to pass a Royal Navy swim test too. So entry requirements, they're constantly changing depending on requirements at BRNC and whatnot, but they can be found up to date on the Royal Navy website or just by simply searching RFA jobs on Google or something like that. But to put it briefly, if a candidate has anything less than GCSEs A to C or 4 and above, they could go down the apprenticeship route, but that excludes the communications. So for those with C and above, it's a cadetship or a communication apprenticeship. And for logistics officers, it's those who hold a relevant degree. So that's, if you've got any questions on the RFA, please type them into the chat, and me and my colleague Emily, who's in the office with me, will be able to answer any questions. Thank you for your time, Laura.
No problem. That was fantastic. Thank you very much for that. And if I can just say that the RFA are helping me to deliver a full hour's CPD training on careers and opportunities in their organisation before the end of this month. So I'll put a link in the chat if you would like to find out more about that. You're very welcome to come along. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, Steve. You might. But
it's on the spot here.
Yeah, it's the last week in May, isn't it? 25th, 26th. I'll put a link to it in the chat anyway.
Yeah.
But thank you for that. That was absolutely fascinating. Okay, I'm going to reshare my screen and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Blue, who's going to talk to us about the leisure marine part of the maritime sector.
Thanks, Lorna, and good morning, everybody. I'm joined this morning by my colleague Richard Cookson from Oyster Yachts, who's going to talk a little bit more after me, specifically about the yachts they build and the opportunities that they have within Oyster coming up. So could we have the next slide, please, Lorna? So my name is Blue Davies. I'm head of training at British Marine. Next slide, please. And this is who we are. We're the trade association for the UK leisure, super yacht and small commercial marine industry. So all those sailing yachts and motorboats you see around the coastline, those are part of our marine sector. Boats that were bought or built and bought from some of our members, and all the stuff that goes on them as well. We've got about 1,400 members within our association, and I'll tell you a little bit more about those as we go through the presentation. Next slide, please, Lorna. So what I'm going to do is give you an overview of the marine leisure sector. Next slide, please, Lorna. So here you'll see on screen the different kind of sectors that we have within our sector, ranging from boat building, boat repair and servicing, through to kind of retail type opportunities, such as you'll find in chandleries, where they sell all the bits and pieces that go on boats, the ropes, the fenders, the life jackets, all that kind of stuff, through to engine and equipment manufacture, so building the engines that go inboard or outboard on the different types of vessels, through to brokerage, which is kind of selling boats, to marinas, where people park their boats, and all the facilities that will come within a marina to help maintain and service and look after all the different aspects of having a boat. And finally, through to kind of those business support services, whether it's accounting, a lawyer, and that was mentioned earlier. They're all part of our marine sector and offer different roles and opportunities for young people and people who are have established their career, more professional people who perhaps want to take a different direction and try something different. So there's a selection of the different types of areas that people can work in within the marine sector. Next slide, please, Lorna. So we do have a career page on our website, and there's the link there. The slides will go out later, so you can have access to that and look at it in a bit more detail. Now, it's mainly geared really for younger people coming into the sector. However, we will develop some pages as we go through the next kind of 6 to 12 months to make it more appealing for professional people who perhaps want to look into coming to our sector, and give them some more information about what they can expect and how those transferable skills can be used within the marine sector. Next slide, please, Lorna. So we've got these marine job cards on our website. There's 12 of them in total. There's a couple of them there you can see. There's the boat builder and marine engineer one. So if people just want to kind of have a look at a bit more detail of the type of roles that they can expect to be involved in, or could look at being involved in, it tells you a little bit more about the type of role there is, kind of what the skills are needed, what qualifications are needed, what type of salary they can expect. So they're quite good for, we use them on our careers events for younger people, but they can also be used for older people as well, who can just get a feel for perhaps what the expectations could be on the different types of roles that we have. Next slide, please, Lorna. There you'll see the other types of cards we have there. There's the other 10, ranging from surveyors, project managers, captains on a boat, skippers, project managers. What else have we got? Naval architects as well, so people who design boats. So there's a link at the bottom there. You can download the cards, and people can print them off and take them home and have them to discuss with other people and show to other people as well. So there's a bit of information there which gives you a good idea, an overview of the different roles within the sectors that we have. Next slide, please, Lorna. One of the big things that we do within British Marine is that we develop apprenticeships, and Ian touched on these earlier. Those are the 5 that we have currently been working on. The first 4 have been developed and are available for delivery. And the last one, the marine surface finisher, which is essentially painting and spraying a boat, that's currently in development and should be available for September time. So these are the apprenticeship programs that a lot of our bigger companies will use. So people like Oyster Yachts, Richard, who'll be speaking in a minute. We've got Sunseeker, Princess, Bertham down in Lymington, Pendennis down in Cornwall. These are the apprenticeship programs that they will access for the new people coming into their companies, to get them trained up and skilled to a specific level, so they can have a career either with them, or in some respects these people move on to other companies within the marine sector as well, which is great. As long as we keep those skills within the marine sector, that's what we're kind of after. However, companies will employ apprentices in other vocations, and there's a selection there ranging from business support, IT, fab and weld, through to engineer, manufacture, marketing, and many more apprenticeships that are available can be used within the marine sector. And next slide, please, Laura. So one of the big things that we do each year is the Southampton International Boat Show every September, and this is a great opportunity to come and have a look at our sector, to see what it's all about, look at some of the boats, speak to some of the people that are involved in building them, selling them, and all the other support services that go around maintaining our industry, make sure it works for everybody. If you want to bring school children or students along, there's an email there, Southampton, that's schools@southamptonboatshow.com, where free tickets can be available for parties of school children and students from colleges. The other thing we do at the event is we celebrate the success of all the apprentices that have finished in the past 12 months. And in the picture there's a chap called Monty Halls, who's our guest speaker, who's a marine biologist, he's a TV presenter, ex-Royal Marine. So we celebrate their success, we give them some certificates, and welcome to the sector, hoping that they'll stay within the sector and remember British Marine as they progress through their careers. Next slide, please, Lorna. So what I'd like to do now is hand over to Richard from Oyster Yachts, and he's going to talk a little bit more about what they do and some of the opportunities they have within the company. Richard, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Blue, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to speak here. I've certainly been learning a lot as I've been listening to this as well. My name's Richard. I work in the HR team here at Oyster Yachts. Blue's mentioned a few sort of brands there, and I often feel that the sort of luxury boat builders and brands that we've got in the country are sometimes not known about, and it's good to have this opportunity to just share a little bit about what we do. We, Oyster Yachts, we're a British brand. We've been building blue water sailing yachts since 1973. What I mean by blue water is that our boats are capable of sailing anywhere around the globe. And interestingly, Oyster owners have sailed over 20 million blue water miles. That equates to over 90 circumnavigations of the globe. And we're very proud that they do that in complete safety, comfort and luxury as well. Very proud of our yachts that we build. And if you go to the next slide, I've got a little video, which I always worry about the technology of these sorts of things on there, whether these will play. The reason I wanted to just put this video on in the background whilst I talk over it is just to give everyone a sort of visual representation of the type of craftsmanship that goes into our yachts. We employ a range of highly skilled craftsmen and women that are involved in the production of yachts that range from 50 to 125 foot. These are handcrafted from exceptional materials, which this video, as I talk over it, will just give you a little feel of some of the detail and quality that goes into our product. In terms of the size of our business, we are at roughly 400 people at the moment. We're in a very fortunate position coming out of the pandemic to be growing. We've got strong demand and growth, and I think this is reflected at the moment across a number of other businesses across leisure and commercial marine, and indeed other sectors of the maritime sector. So we are in that fortunate position post-pandemic to be hiring extensively into the business. We are looking to do that across a number of areas, but predominantly within production, so that we can ensure we keep up with our order book. And just in terms of sort of that order book, we're actually fully stacked with boat orders well into 2023, 2024, which in the marine sector is a great pipeline to have visibility of, and obviously we'll be getting orders on top of that. We are based in Southampton. We've also got a facility in Hythe. We also, again, have a production facility in Norfolk, just to the northeast of Norwich, in a place called Wroxham. And very close to that, we've got basically a composite technology centre that actually composites our hulls. So we actually build those in-house. And then we've also got a facility in Ipswich. For the benefit of this presentation, just to focus on Southampton and Hythe, because I know most people here, I think, are from the south coast of England. We design, build, maintain, and help manage the entire sort of oyster fleet out of Southampton and those associated facilities. Hythe is a new facility that we've taken on board to focus on the new production of a 50-foot luxury sailing yacht. As I say, with the video in the background, hopefully that's given you a good sort of example of some of the stuff that we're doing in-house here. So we have a joinery shop, we've got the production facility, we've got a design office. So we actually design the boats in-house and are supported by a number of partners with that. So it's great to actually get a sense. I sit here and I can walk out onto the production facility and see everyone hard at work and delivering what truly is an exceptional project. And we actually then get to see it go out onto the water, get commissioned and go out onto sea trials there too. We are very proud of the fact that we're using sort of British products, creating something that's beautiful and unique, and it's very much respected around the world. If you just flip to the next slide, it will just give you a quick picture, just so that this doesn't go on loop, of that's the Oyster 495, which is what we call a baby oyster, but it's still a 50-foot luxury sailing yacht, so still something quite impressive. As I say, we got up to 125 foot. We feel that our yachts are able to set the benchmark in craftsmanship. They make life-enhancing adventures possible for our owners. And on that point, we also operate what's called the Oyster World Rally, where we support a fleet of boats every year to circumnavigate the globe. So it's an assisted circumnavigation. We're fast growing, as I said, and if you just flick through the next slide, please, Lorna, that just gives you a quick insight to an interior of the boat. But if you go through to the next slide as well, just to give you an idea of the type of positions that we employ. Our boat builders, we look at sort of the exterior and interior of the boat. Obviously, we're building the whole vessel here. What we generally look for is people that will have some sort of qualification, be that through a city and guilds, ideally focusing on woodwork. That's the predominant sort of focus for us, and we're actually keen to get people who've got previous marine experience, but it's not a necessity for us at the moment. We will look for people that maybe might have had previous experience in a trade in shop fit out, in the construction sector, and we will transition those skills and offer them training and support to then enhance those skill sets into what we're doing. So yeah, it's not just a marine focus that we're looking for. That also applies to bench joiners. We've got a lot of people that have joined us who have come from the construction sector that will be involved in actual sort of joinery of specific furniture, tables, chairs, etc. A lot of the work we do is sort of curvature focused. We use a lot of plywoods. So, you know, we will again transition people in from those sorts of industries to get involved in what we feel is a very exciting sector. Marine electricians, again, all the electrics are done in-house. The laminators that we employ, again, we've got the lamination teams that are done in-house as well. And again, we will look for a range of sort of skill sets through from the laminators up to the finishers who support in the sort of buffing and snagging of the boats as well. And then marine engineers, our yachts do also have engines on board and obviously associated facilities as well, the plumbing, HVAC systems, etc., that we will bring people through. Also, just wanted to touch, I think Blue's mentioned there and Ian previously about the apprenticeship program. We run a apprenticeship academy in-house at Oyster, but with the support of local colleges. They are a level 3 apprenticeship, 4-year course, where this year we are looking at an intake of 14 apprentices, and that again will be undertaken again next year. So we've got, you know, high demand. We're a sort of unknown, sort of hidden gem, I feel, certainly in Southampton. We're based near to the football stadium. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to sort of answer those in due course. I know Blue kindly said about Hive. I didn't appreciate there was a Hive in Kent, so we are the Hive in Hampshire. But yeah, next slide just gives me some contact details, my contact details. Sorry. So if anyone needs to contact me or reach out, I'll be more than happy to help. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Richard, for that. We were going to have another quick presentation this morning by another colleague, but unfortunately she was unable to join us. But what I'd like to say is that Marine Resources are a recruitment company based out of Southampton, and they have a lot of jobs that are not just marine related, but cover the wider maritime sector. So you can always point your clients towards Marine Resources to have a look at their website and the array of opportunities that they have within the marine and wider maritime sector. Next slide, please, Lorna. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Richard, for your presentation as well. If you've got any questions, please do type them in the chat and we'll try and answer them for you. Thanks, Lorna. Lorna, you're on mute at the moment.
Well done, Blue. Thank you for that. We're really short of time, and I had a number of other slides that I was going to run through, but I think we'll just sum up where we are now. I hope you have found that useful. We extended this session to 1.5 hours from the last time because we had so much information that we wanted to share with Job Centre Plus colleagues. I'll make sure that you have access to the recording of this session and to a PDF version of the presentation afterwards. I think what I'd like to say is that we value you as key influencers talking on behalf of the maritime sector when you're working with your claimants. And as such, Maritime UK Careers Programme has a careers professionals network, and I would invite you to join that. There's a link to it in the final slides, which you'll get access to. We also, as I said, run a series of more industry specific CPD sessions. So the Royal Fleet Auxiliary is the next one that's coming up. We have one that's on careers at sea and super yacht crewing in June, and we're doing one on design careers in maritime, looking not just at naval architecture but also infrastructure. And it's a local architectural firm that's based in Winchester, and a design agency that designs bits and pieces and equipment for the maritime sector. So we would take 1 hour to look at those sorts of careers in a bit more detail. You're free to join those sessions if you're able to do so. They tend to be a bit further on in the day. Looking at Richard and Steve, obviously Steve's coming back and we're doing that Royal Fleet Auxiliary session. Richard, I would love to do one on yacht building. That's not something that we've done yet, so I'll maybe get in touch with you afterwards and we'll have a look at that. I have this ambition really for the programme that I can't possibly talk to every job seeker, every young person, school, college, university leaver, but we are trying really hard to help key influencers understand the sector better. And I kind of, in echoing what Richard said there, I hope that when you have someone who's sitting down with you who has perhaps carpentry and joinery skills and is looking for a new opportunity, that by running these sorts of sessions, when you talk to people about possibly going self-employed, becoming a kitchen fitter, working on cabinet making, working in a workshop, that you'll also remember that in the south, looking at boat building would be a really exciting place for someone to take those existing skills. We are also looking for electricians, engineers, mechanical or electrical engineers, all the trades really, as well as welcoming people from all walks of life. The sector employs 1.1 million people. The Department for Trade has predicted that it will double in size in the next 10 years. Maritime is thriving. That's to do with things like free ports, it's to do with Brexit, it's to do with the fact that the sector is digitalising, that we're moving into autonomous craft, that we're moving into all that work around becoming carbon net zero by the target being 2050. So we just wanted to tell you really that Maritime's here, we're open for business, as Richard said, and funnily enough, when we did this session last summer, the employers that came along and supported that session, which again were leisure marine employers, but also Portsmouth International Port, all talked about current vacancies and the fact that they'd never been busier. And that was coming out of the first lockdown last summer. So really, Maritime's here for business. I will make sure that you have a copy of this full presentation. You just have to put Maritime UK Careers into Google and you'll find our area of the website. And I'm grateful for your giving us your time this morning. And if we can do anything to help in the future, happy to do so. In National Careers Week in March, we did a public-facing event in the Southwest for adult job seekers. Now, if that's something that you think some of your clients and claimants would find useful, it's something we could make available in the South, but just get in touch with me. So without further ado, we are now out of time. So I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Karen, to Ian, to Rachel, to Blue, and to Steve and Richard, our colleagues that have come in to talk to you this morning. And hopefully we'll be in touch with you again. Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.